Good evening. My name is Hermes Pandelatos, and the controversial law that I wanted to discuss about with you is the agreement between the European Union and Turkey in regards to the current refugee crisis and, of course, the refugees. In order to understand what the refugee crisis stands for, we have to look back to the background. The Arab Spring was a revolutionary movement in the northern Africa and expanded into Middle East. And that aimed to overthrow the totalitarian governments. However, the totalitarian governments responded back, and they created a turmoil in northern Africa and the Middle East that paved the way for terrorist organizations to rise and gain power. And of course, several refugees wanted to flee these atrocities that these terrorist organizations were committing. As a result, many refugees went back they fled to neighboring countries, but also they fled to Europe. And up until now, 2 million refugees have fled from Middle East and Africa, have fled to the European Union. However, because of the xenophobia in that it's still rising in Europe, and the nationalist movements, the EU-Turkey deal had to come up with a regulation of the refugee flow into the European Union, and that's why they drafted the EU-Turkey deal. The EU-Turkey deal is actually a regulation of the refugee flow to Europe. The deal aimed to detain refugees in Greece and then deport them back to Turkey. There would be a compensation to Turkey for that, 3 billion upon the enforcement of the deal, and then another 3 billion upon implementation of policies given by the European Union. Further benefits like visa-free travels to Europe were also given to Turkey. However, in order to understand the controversy behind the EU-Turkey deal, we need to see the international law that already exists for the refugees. The UN Refugee Convention of 1951 defines refugee as everybody who is fleeing war, persecution, civil war, and natural disasters. It also prohibits the deportation and detention of refugees. There's furthermore, it makes mandatory for countries to let the refugees have a free passage through their countries. Other conventions and treaties also have regulations in regards to refugees and reflect several rights of the refugees. We can see that the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights gives the freedom to every person to choose their residence and the freedom of movement within any country. The Convention Against Torture also gives states that no expulsion is legal. No expulsion of any person is legal to a country where fundamental rights are going to be violated. And then lastly, the Convention on the Rights of Child indicates that children detention along with adults is prohibited. Furthermore, the European legislation also prohibits the same violations, like the European Convention on Human Rights, where the EU and Turkey are signatories. They prohibit degrading treatment of refugees, and furthermore, there's the Common European Asylum System, which is the direct implementation of the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, which we talked earlier. There's also the Court of Justice, which ensures that there are penalties are going to be implemented in case the refugee laws and the refugee rights are violated. So the controversy is that the EU-Turkey deal lacks legality. As we talked earlier, the refugees have rights, but it seems that the deal is violating them. So the EU-Turkey deal is a clear violation of refugee rights, and also it's obvious that the deal seems the EU contradicts their own legislation. We see refugees being incarcerated, being detained in Greece and deported. The two fundamental rights of the refugees: not deportation and not detention. And then there is no free passage because the EU-Turkey deal closes the borders of Greece, so the refugees can go nowhere else, and they are trapped there. Of course, there are further implications of the deal, such as the relocation of the routes of refugees from the Aegean Sea, let's say, to Libya, which is more dangerous trip for the refugees, and hence we have more deaths. One can see here the chart that in 2014 we had 3,500 deaths. In 2015, almost the same number, and in 2016, with the implementation of the deal, we see a rise on this number. So one can see that the deal brings more, let's say, death to the refugees rather than helping them. So in conclusion, we see we see why the EU-Turkey deal is controversial, and there must be some more. The implementation of the refugee law should be harsher. Unfortunately, the European Union, after the 9/11 attacks, had some American influence in regards to Muslim population, which is and now I feel that the Europe should revive the cultural acceptance of any other religion. Furthermore, we need to put some more harsher sanctions to the violators of the international laws, because overall, with the sanctions that already exist, only the people of the countries, only the citizens of the countries are impacted, and not the governments. The governments continue to do what they want. So overall, what we need to do is a collectivist action that is collective action, and not unilateral or bilateral treaties. In regards to the EU-Turkey deal, it is obvious that this treaty was a bilateral treaty between the EU-Turkey deal, the European Union and Turkey, and nobody even thought about the refugee rights. Thank you very with this slide of my citations, I conclude my presentation. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have very good Christmas. Very nice Christmas.